days along the Mexican coastline to reach the beach village of Costa Azul. He carried only a small backpack and his clothes were worn. From the moment he entered Costa Azul in the fall of 2008, he felt a deep sense of relief. The mangrove swamps, nearby cornfields, crashing ocean and protected lagoon reminded him of his home in El Salvador, but here no one wanted to kill him. Only a few hundred people lived in the beachside community, though it was densely populated by flocks of migrating birds, many making the 2,000-mile annual journey south from California. Thousands of sea turtles embarked from coastal hatcheries to breed and migrate, some making the 12,000-mile swim across the Pacific Ocean to China. The town was half ecotourism paradise, half lawless Wild West, ideal cover for a man trying to escape his past and embark on a new life. Quick with a smile and a helping hand, the round-faced, light-skinned Alvarenga arrived without a visa or working papers, so he pretended to be Mexican. He vigorously defended the lie if anyone questioned his story. Once, when Mexican policemen stopped him and suggested he was a foreigner, Alvarenga broke out with a stanza from the Mexican national anthem. War. War without truce against who would attempt to blemish the honor of the fatherland. War. War. The patriotic banners saturated in waves of blood. Alvarenga had a terrible singing voice made worse by an overdose of confidence. His rendition was off-key and overflowing with nationalistic pride. Convinced by the enthusiasm of his off-the-cuff performance, the police released him. Costa Azul is a lost corner of Chiapas, Mexico's poorest state in a region where emigrants tend not to stop as they continue on the long trek north to the United States. Few arrivals see much of an economic salvation in the tattered local economy. But the 30-year-old Alvarenga wasn't looking at land. His eyes were focused on the Pacific Ocean and had been since he was 11 years old and had run away from school to live at the beach with friends. Costa Azul would serve not as home but as home base. He would launch seaward for multi-day ocean journeys to the richest remaining fishing grounds along Mexico's plundered coastal ecosystems. Insulated from the fury of the Pacific Ocean by a miles-long island that creates a natural lagoon, and surrounded by tangled mangrove forests untouched by loggers, thousands of fish inhabit this postcard-perfect lagoon, discovering only too late their fatal error when speared alive on the knife-sharp bill of a blue heron or crushed in the jaws of a crocodile. Like the migrating birds, Alvarenga was attracted to the protected lagoon and its unending supply of easy-to-catch fish. From afar, it gleamed like a refuge. While vicious storms roared offshore, sometimes lasting for weeks, the mangrove jungles absorbed and sheltered this small community. Like the eye of a hurricane, Costa Azul's beauty had an eerie ability to disguise imminent danger. Going out to sea might seem simple, but it is a monster you must face, explains a colleague of Alvarenga known as El Hombre Lobo, the Wolfman. If you are going to face the sea, you have to be ready for all it can toss at you, including the wind, a storm or a big animal that might eat you, all those dangers. People go out for these little seaside trips. That is not the ocean. The ocean is out there past 120 kilometers, 70 miles. The folks on the beach here live comfortable. They go to sleep in a bed, but out there, you feel terror. Even in your chest you feel it. Your heart beats different. Though Alvarenga arrived in Costa Azul by walking across sharp rocks and through thick coastal swamps, nearly everyone else reaches the town by way of a narrow paved road from Mexican Coastal Highway 200. The 7-mile spur off the main highway ends at the Costa Azul waterfront and offers two options that cleave the town. Turn right and there are chic eco-resorts with flavorless Mexican food, $12 margaritas and private birding tours that capitalize on the fondness of English tourists of pecking incessantly at a personalized list of bird sightings. Palm-studded white sand beaches lure these tourists with the promise of privacy, virgin scenery, hummingbirds, rosy spoonbills, osprey and dozens more species that flitter and fly with abandon. The waiters may question the wisdom of allowing tourist children to frolic by the lagoon's edge, where a crocodile the size of a station wagon visits frequently, but since they are never encouraged to express opinions to the guests or highlight local dangers, they keep their concerns to themselves. Most of the homes between the hotels have been purchased by local businessmen and politicians who envision a gold mine of tourism as soon as Mexico sheds its reputation as a blood-stained narco state where bars occasionally get firebombed and waitresses decapitated. That is the nice side of the tracks. On the left side of town sits a row of low-budget fishing shacks and an oceanfront dock packed with a dozen canoe-shaped boats 25 feet long and capable of hitting 50 miles per hour, especially when powered by a pair of 75-horsepower Yamaha outboard motors. This is the part of town where Alvarenga arrived. He had a decade's experience as a fisherman and hoped to find a boss or patron willing to give him a shot at fulfilling his lifelong dream of being his own captain on a small fishing boat. But he needed to go slow. Visitors to this tough guy neighborhood are immediately confronted with stares and a few basic questions. Who are you? What do you want? Like an Ira bar in Ireland or certain Italian restaurants in Boston's North End, Costa Azul maintains an insular tribal loyalty that binds the men together. There is no such thing as a casual visit to these quarters. A local fisherman suggests why the scene is so edgy. You want to see what's really going on in the Chiapas region. Go out to the island at 2 a.m. and watch all the narco boats running north. They are moving $2 million a night in cocaine up this coast. The entire police force for the state of Oaxaca, just north of Chiapas, has been paid off. Alvarenga was not a narco or willing to run even the occasional cocaine bale up the coast, despite the promise of riches. At sea off the coast of Mexico, he had seen the savage fate of fishermen who gambled in the business of Los Kilos, and run afoul of drug lords. Once he had motored up to a fisherman's half-sunken boat and found the hull riddled with bullets. He tried to haul it home but it sank. There was no sign of the crew. Being eaten alive by sharks was probably the least violent way they could have died. At least sharks didn't torture. When he arrived in Costa Azul, Alvarenga said little. His actions spoke volumes as he quietly found a broom and began sweeping the streets, picking trash up from the docks and making himself a home under a tree. As he opened up to the locals, Alvarenga's enthusiasm, his generosity in lending a helping hand to local fishermen and his diligent sweeping up of the touristy part of town quietly impressed them. Without anyone telling him what to do, he would pitch in, he was always helping. That is how you win people over, recalls Jarocho, a veteran fisherman who works in Costa Azul. Alvarenga appeared too clean and organized to be a vagabond, yet he shared few personal details regarding his past. When he chose, he was a dazzling storyteller, eager and able to entertain the audience as he unveiled stories of his adventures at sea. A local chef initially paid the stout and muscled young man for his labor in food. Then he gave him a few 50 peso notes worth $4, and before the first month was over Alvarenga gained work as a fisherman's assistant. These jobs fixing the lines are boring but he liked to bring them in perfect, remembers Jarocho. He would say, boss, this one lacks 20 hooks. And if the nets weren't stored just right he would unroll them and he would fold it perfectly. He would say, this is what brings in the money, a missing hook here and there and you catch less. He would always pay attention to the details. Alvarenga's goal in Costa Azul was to join up with its clan of some 100 fishermen. The protected lagoon allowed them to escape the wrath of seasonal winds that form in the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea, but through a quirk of geography hit hardest on this, the Pacific side of Mexico. These storms begin in the Gulf of Mexico then swirl southwest, where the winds are channeled through a narrow gap in the Sierra Madre Mountains. The bottleneck doubles or triples the wind speed, meaning that a fresh 20 miles per hour wind in the Caribbean Sea comes out as a 60 miles per hour blast that scientists describe as a wind jet. This screaming wind tunnel blasts into the Gulf of Tehuantepec, an area just off the coast of Costa Azul. For years Alvarenga had been fishing farther south, near the Guatemalan border, but he knew the deadly legacy of these storms was measured in missing boats and lost fishermen. He had heard late-night stories of being trapped by winds that locals simply called a norteño. These northern winds were so frequent that local newscasts did not even bother to give them a proper name like Katrina or Sandy, but simply referred to them as Cold Front Number 6 or Cold Front Number 26 and warned fishermen to stay at port. This wind tunnel is so notorious and well marked on nautical charts that sailboats often chart a detour hundreds of miles out to sea to avoid the dreaded Gulf winds. During the winter months, you can expect gales almost every day. Winds of 50 to 60 knots, 70–80 miles per hour, are not uncommon, reads a description in Roads Less Traveled, a respected online travel guide. Every year, hapless vessels both large and small get caught out in the 200-mile-wide Gulf when it shows its malicious side. Even large ships are unable to resist the storm-force winds in fast-building and breaking seas. Vessels have no option but to turn downwind and brace themselves for a long and frightening ride south and out to sea for 200 to 300 miles, at which point the effects of the Tehuantepec winds begin to fade. If ever there was a place not to head to sea in a small, easy-to-roll boat, this was it. But jobs are scarce in Chiapas. Overfishing has decimated the fish population along entire stretches of the Mexican and Central American coast. The high-value fish, what's left of them, are driven farther out to sea. So the fishermen follow. To fill the icebox, these fishermen now commute 50 miles, 75 miles and even 100 miles off the Chiapas coast. Only after a dangerous 5-hour trip crashing through the waves can they cut the motor, drop their 2-mile-long line studded with up to 700 hooks and hope the tuna, mahi-mahi, marlin and sharks are biting. Sharks are their preferred catch. Unlike some nations where only the fins are sold, in Mexico shark steak is a traditional offering on restaurant menus. Despite attempts at conservation and evidence of a population collapse, thousands of tons of sharks are hauled every year from the dangerous waters of the Gulf of Tehuantepec. In recompense for the risks, fishermen are paid minimal wages. They live on the long tail of a global economy that prices a single half-pound serving of tuna at $25 in the Costa Azul resort restaurants but for which they earn only 40 cents. But when the fish are running and a 60-hour shift can earn a man $250 cash, straight into his pocket, there are no limits on the fervor and party madness that erupts on Costa Azul's left bank. A band of outcasts and society's castaways, they are bound together in tribal unity and by the codes and deadly instincts of professional hunters. The Wolfman explains the philosophy in simple, deadly terms. Poverty makes you do strange things. Poor people have to do whatever is necessary to get food. If you don't have a job other than fishing in the ocean, what option do you have?